friends, my name is Emily and welcome back to my channel. This is episode 4 of Lumos and I am looking at the 2001 adaptation of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Before we hop into it, let's do some stats that I feel like maybe we need to familiarize ourselves with or refamiliarize ourselves with. This film was adapted by Chris Columbus and the Harry Potter franchise was distributed by Warner Brothers. It was written by Steve Kloves and produced by David Heyman. It was released to cinemas November 16th, 2001. John Williams was chosen to compose the score for the movie, and I do want to get Bailey, my podcast co-host, on during this series to talk a little bit about the music in the films. Keep an eye out for that. The film seems to have mixed reviews, like there are generally positive responses on things like Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, and Cinescore. I found the film boring, and I'm not the only one. Other critics agree with that assessment. Richard Corliss of Time magazine called it a, quote, by-the-numbers adaptation, and Nathaniel Rogers called it, quote, as bland as movies can get. I think both of those statements speak to how faithfully this was adapted and how a direct transplantation of ideas from book to film isn't always a good thing. I did talk a little bit about adaptation in my Dark Tower project. Let's cut to Dark Tower, Emily, and hear a little bit about adaptation. Adaptation is defined as the transfer of a work or story in whole or in part to a feature film. What we need to remember is that the source material and the adaptation are always talking to each other, and our understanding of one shapes our understanding of the other. But we have to remember, my favorite, Mr. Roland Barthes, meaning doesn't transfer directly from the writer to the reader. Remember Roland Barthes' Death of the Author, don't care about what the author intends. What we care about, what Barthes cares about, what I care about, is what is textually present. And the meaning of the text is produced by the reader in relation to the text. So it's our baggage we bring to the text that brings meaning. So folks involved in adapting a film experience this same mediation. Say I want to make an adaptation of my favorite children's fantasy novel, Protector of the Small by Tamora Pierce. I don't have access to the inside of Tamora Pierce's head. I have access to the text, and how I read the text is how I write the script, how I envision the setting, how I cast the characters, right? It is the text that stands as a link between the author, Tamora Pierce, and me, the reader. And how I interpret it is entirely based on my engagement with the words that I've been given. So here's the question. Why don't we make literal adaptations? There are so many times, and I can say this myself, having grown up reading the Harry Potter series and then watching the films and being so disappointed, I think especially with the 4th film, where the book was massive and the movie just took all of the exciting parts and like jammed it together with none of the character building stuff, right? Why don't they make literal adaptations? Well, that's been tried. In 1924, a human called Erich von Stroheim attempted a literal adaptation of book to film. The product was 9.5 hours long, and he was forced to cut it down to 4 hours because they were like, dude, nobody is sitting in a theater to watch a 9.5 hour film. You need to edit this down. And he was like, well, it doesn't make sense if I take out all these things. So 4 hours. 4 hours is the best I can do. The theater showing it made even further cuts so that the film was down to a watchable 2-hour film. And at that point, the story that was left was largely incoherent. Very few people have tried a literal book-to-film adaptation since then. We just have to make adaptations to tell the same story, to get the same meaning across to a new audience. We don't have to use the same words, we don't have to use the same dialogue, we don't have to use the same settings, but we have to transfer the same meanings across. So let's talk about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, my interest always lies in representation of women. I feel like a broken record saying this, but if you're coming to this in isolation, I did my master's thesis on the representation of women in young adult fantasy, and Harry Potter, specifically Hermione Granger, was one of the characters that I focused on in her gendered performance in that gender role throughout the books. So it's what I want to focus on today because I can. And this is my series. Like, yes, there are many characters we could do this with. I've seen people do this with Ron, why book Ron is better than movie Ron, the differences between the Dumbledores, Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore in particular, the "How did you put your name in a goblet of fire?" Dumbledore said calmly, is frequently cited as like just differences in the characters and how the film portrayal affects the characterization. I think the biggest thing that bugs me about the film adaptation is how it changes how we perceive Hermione. I'm thinking specifically of the final tasks. Like, there are some things that I think it does better, and there are some things that I think it does worse to the detriment of her character and who we understand her character to be. This is the chapter through the trapdoor. They've all just jumped down the trapdoor. Quote, "Lucky this plant thing's here, really," said Ron. "Lucky?" shrieked Hermione. "Look at you both." She leapt up and struggled towards a damp wall. She had to struggle because the moment she had landed, the plant had started to twist snake-like trendles around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly in long creepers without their noticing. Hermione had managed to free herself before the plant got a firm grip on her. Now she watched in horror as the two boys fought to pull the plant off them. But the more they strained against it, the tighter and faster the plant wound around them. "Stop moving," Hermione ordered them. "I know what it is. It's Devil's Snare." She identifies this plant that has trapped her friends. She tells them to stop moving, stop struggling, let me figure this out. "Oh, I'm so glad we know what it's called. That's a great help," snarled Ron, leaning back, trying to stop the plant curling around his neck. "Shut up! I'm trying to remember how to kill it," said Hermione. "Well, hurry up, I can't breathe," Harry gasped, wrestling with it as it curled around his chest. Devil's Snare, what did Professor Sprout say? It likes the dark and damp. So light a fire! Harry choked. Hermione's identified it, she knows what it likes, and Harry's offering the solution here. He suggests the action she should take. "Yes, of course! But there's no wood!" Hermione cried, wringing her hands. So here she's not thinking clearly, she's panicked a little bit, she's lived her whole life as a muggle, magic is relatively new to her, and so her first reaction, if you're lighting a fire, it's with like wood and matches. And Ron goes, "Have you gone mad? Are you a witch or not?" And I feel like this is played for laughs, right? Like this is a book for children, 9 to 12-year-olds, even younger. I had this read to me when I was like 5 or 6. My sister was 2 or 3. Like, my mom read this out loud to us. So, you know, you gotta balance out the darkness of a giant plant strangling small children, but it invites us to laugh at Hermione's failure and like it discredits her a little bit. And she goes, "Oh, right!" And she whipped out her wand, waved it, muttered something, and sent a jet of the same blue flame she had used on Snape at the plant. In a matter of seconds, the two boys felt it loosening its grip as it cringed away from the light and warmth. Wriggling and flailing, it unraveled itself from their bodies and they were able to pull free. So after prompting, like, "By the way, remember you have magic." I know that in previous crisis modes throughout your life, you have not known about magic, but you have magic now, right? And she does come up with a solution. She conjures these little blue flames, right? And Harry acknowledges her contribution and the role that she played. Sorry, you can hear water running. I'm not home alone today. "Lucky you pay attention in herbology, Hermione," said Harry, as he joined her by the wall, wiping sweat off his face. And then Ron highlights her failure. "Yeah," said Ron, "and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis. There's no wood, honestly." And so that is from page 297 to 299 in these editions of the book. So what this does is it shows off her strengths in her ability to like study and memorize facts and take in this wizarding world, but it also sort of highlights this failure in that taking a magical approach to problems is not her first act. And so this is her first task, and it's more of a group effort than hers alone. In the film, Hermione shines.
Stop moving, both of you. This is Devil's Snare. You have to relax. If you don't, it'll only kill you faster.
She quotes this little riddle.
Devil's Snare. It's deadly fun, but we'll sulk in the sun, that's it. Devil's Snare hates sunlight.
She does a spell. She comes up with the whole thing. In the film, because this is her sole task, they really beef up her ability. They don't undermine her strengths as a witch, her internalization of this knowledge of what she's been taught, and her execution of a spell, right? The film makes this her shining moment in a way that the text makes it more of a, I guess, human moment. It highlights the fact that she doesn't automatically think like a witch. She still is very much muggle raised in how she approaches problems, and I argue that this is played for laughs and that Ron is our comedic relief character here, which is a little disappointing. But Hermione has a second chance. Ron's shining moment is the chess game. He plays chess, he sacrifices himself, and then, quote, with one last desperate look back at Ron, Harry and Hermione charged through the door and up the next passageway. What if he's... Hermione starts to say. He'll be all right, said Harry, trying to convince himself, and that's on page 304. Ron sacrifices himself so that both Harry and Hermione can continue on with this quest. No questions asked. The two of them charge through the door onward to the next task, right? In the film, Hermione's journey on the quest ends there.
Take care of Ron. Then go to the Owlery. Send a message to Dumbledore. Ron's right. I have to go on.
And then she gives this disgustingly simpering speech about how awesome Harry is.
You'll be okay, Harry. You're a great wizard. You really are.
Not as good as you.
Me, books and cleverness. There are more important things. Friendship and bravery. And Harry, just be careful.
In the book, she has another moment to shine. The potions riddle that is entirely eliminated from the film. I've talked about this a couple of times, this scene where they approach a table with various shaped bottles, but when Hermione sees this, quote, she let out a great sigh, and Harry, amazed, saw that she was smiling. The very last thing he felt like doing. Brilliant, said Hermione. This isn't magic. It's logic, a puzzle. A lot of the greatest wizards haven't got an ounce of logic. They'd be stuck here forever. But so will we, won't we? Asks Harry. Of course not, said Hermione. Everything we need is here on this paper. And then Harry asks, but how do we know which to drink? So we know that Harry wouldn't get past on his own. And Hermione goes, give me a minute. And so she reads the paper several times, and at last she claps her hands. Got it, she said. The smallest bottle will get us through the black fire towards the stone. Harry looked at the tiny bottle. There's only enough here for one of us, he said. That's hardly one swallow. They looked at each other. Which one will get you back through the purple flames? Hermione pointed at a round bottle to the right end of the line. You drink that, said Harry. No, listen. Get back and get Ron, grab brooms from the flying key room. They'll get you out of the trapdoor and past Fluffy. Go straight to the Owlery, and send Hedwig to Dumbledore, etc. Hermione's lip trembled, and she suddenly dashed at Harry and threw her arms around him. Hermione, you're a great wizard, you know? I'm not as good as you, said Harry, very embarrassed, as she let go of him. Me, said Hermione. Books and cleverness. There are more important things, friendship and bravery, and oh, Harry, be careful. But she's not going back to take care of Ron. She's going back to deliver a message to Dumbledore. And it's not a choice that she stay behind and take care of Ron, take on this maternal role as she does later throughout a lot of the books. She steps into this maternal role quite a bit. Eventually, I will probably shit on her magic beaded bag that's just a magical Mary Poppins bag, and Mary Poppins is a caretaker of children. Here, it's circumstance. There is only enough potion in the bottle for one of them to go through. That's why only one of them can keep going on this quest. It's not Hermione's choice or her role as the girl in the film. She's like down on the floor, like making sure he's okay. Then she gives this simpering speech about, oh, Harry, like it's directly that line, "I'm not a very good witch, you're the better wizard." And in the films, I don't think we've seen her do anything to the contrary, right? In the films, Harry is separate from his peers. He's the chosen one, he's the titular character, he does 2 quests, he does the key in the flying key room, he then goes on to get the stone from the mirror. So he solves 2 puzzles where Hermione and Ron each solve 1, right? Hermione does the Devil's Snare, Ron does the chess game. So Harry is elevated in the films. The books, Harry and Hermione are on equal footing. So we know that she has the magical skills of great wizards, right? We've seen her throughout the book demonstrate her ability to pick up on magic way sooner than everyone else. She repairs Harry's glasses the first time we see her on the train, right? Before she's even been to school, she has studied and self-taught simple spells. And then we see her succeed where her peers fail, the Wingardium Leviosa spell. In the book, we see her continue to demonstrate that power, right? She has magical skill, but she also has the logical deduction skills that a lot of great wizards lack, including Harry. So she has distinguished herself, I guess, in the type of great wizard. Harry is the brash, intuitive, very lucky, like that sheer dumb luck thing. He's a great wizard because he's incredibly lucky, and he has really powerful friends like Hermione, who has the skills to back him up in a lot of places where Harry just fails. Like, Harry does have some special things about him. I think later on in the series we'll see him debatably develop into a pretty stellar wizard, but in the first book, a lot of his achievements are dumb luck or natural skill. Like, he doesn't really have to work for anything that demonstrates his greatness, right? Like, he survives Voldemort's attack because of the work that his mother did to protect him with her love. He survives the troll by sheer dumb luck. His skills at Quidditch, his athleticism, are not something that he works towards. It's like this natural ability that he has some coordination and athleticism. Harry doesn't work for the things that distinguish him in the way that Hermione works for the things that distinguish her. And I think that the 2 tasks she has in the book set her apart as a witch with incredible magical skills because she has performed these things beyond her skill level, but she also has these really great logical skills that a lot of her peers, like Harry, and great wizards in general, lack. What this does is it puts Hermione and Ron on equal footing as equal sort of lesser contributors in this quest, which I can see for the purposes of the movie, you want to really enforce that Harry is your protagonist and that he's the chosen one. He's the hero, undoubtedly the hero, so he needs to achieve more and be better and be up on this pedestal. But it does a disservice to one of the only speaking female characters that we have consistently in the films. There are other speaking female characters, but we don't spend nearly as much time with them as we do with Hermione. It does her a disservice. It does her character a disservice to diminish her in this way, because I think she is a really important part of Harry's success and Harry's continued success throughout this series. And so I'm curious to see, as I watch the rest of the films, to see how this small change in the beginning to sort of diminish Hermione's power, how that affects her characterization throughout the rest of the films. And if she deviates in more ways as the books and films progress. Within the first film, no spoilers for anything else, do you have any characters that you see a radical shift in from book to film that you think, that's not how I pictured that character, this was a disappointment to me? I would love to hear just other perspectives on changes in characterization from book to film in the comments down below. Before we go, we have to thank my patrons. Thank you, patrons, for making videos like this possible. If you are interested in supporting this content, in supporting the channel and the work that goes into producing these videos, link to the Patreon page will be on the screen, and as always, in the description box down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you soon with a reading vlog on Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Until next time, happy reading. Bye.